So we're on Daf Pei Vav Amid Beis, and we started the sugya of Maskifla Rav Papa, and this has to do with the statement that we had on Pei Vav Amid Aleph with regard to Chizkiah. Second. Okay. So you remember that in the case of Ben Sora Mora, we need two sets of Eidim, because this young man is guilty of two Gnevas. And then the question was, if there was Hazama on any one of these two pairs of Eidim, the Eidim who testify in the first round of Gneva or the Eidim on the second round of Gneva, and they all seem to be, if we put them all together, they're testifying that the Ben Sora Mora has to be stoned, has to be put to death, and therefore they should be killed under the law of Kasher Zomam if they're proven to be Eidim Zomim. So what was Rav Papa's question? Ihachi, if we're going to put to death the Eidim, let's say, for example, in the case of Gonev Nefesh, once again, we had two pairs of Eidim. So we had the Eidim on the actual abduction, the Gneva, and then we have the Eidim on the Mechira, that after he abducted him, he sold the kidnapped person as an Eved. So Rav Papa says, Eidei Mechira Nami Liktalim, Mitoch Sheyicholim Eidei Gneva Lomar Lal Koso Banu. So the Eidei Gneva that are testifying on the abduction, they are creating a full-fledged Eidus, a complete entity of Eidus. Because as a result of their Eidus, we're going to give the Ben Sora Mora Malchus for the Gneva itself. And therefore, when the second pair of Eidim testify on the Mechira of the stolen person, that's a separate Eidus, the goal of which, the agenda of which, is to put this Gonev Nefesh to death, and therefore they should be subject to the laws of Azama. And Rav Papa sees that as a parallel to the case of Chizkiah in Ben Sora Mora, where the first pair of Eidim testify on the first Gneva for Malchus purposes. Now, the second pair of Eidim are testifying that he's a Ben Sora Mora and he has to be put to death. Hence, the second pair of Eidim will be killed if they are subject to Azama. Same thing should apply in the case of Gneva and Mechira, that when he stole a human being, and that Eidus is a complete Eidus as a self-contained independent unit to be Mechayiv Malchus. Now the second pair of Eidim who testified on the Mechira, they're testifying that he's Chayiv Misa, and therefore they should be subject to Azama. Now, Chizkiah earlier on Daf Pei Vav and Aleph argued against Rabbi Yochanan. And according to Chizkiah, when you have two sets of Eidim, Eidei Gneva and Eidei Mechira, then Huzmu, Einer Rogin. Why not? Why Einer Rogin? If Chizkiah admits that in the case of Ben Sora Mora, the second pair of Edom get Misa, if there was Hazama, then in the case of Goni Nefesh, the second pair of Edom who testify in the Mechira should likewise, if there was Hazama, be put to death. And yet Chizkiah goes on record as saying, Ein Nerogim. So what's the difference between the two? That's what we got up to yesterday. So the Gemara now says, V'chi Tema. Let's just make sure we have the place. We're counting down from the top of Peivavam and Beis 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. V'chi Tema, at the end of the 4th line. Maybe there's no lav in the Torah for abducting a person, for stealing a nefesh. And therefore, the logic of, well, the first pair of Edom was a complete, separate, independent unit doesn't apply over here. And then we apply the principle of Atzi Davar. So the reason why Chizkiah says we don't put to death the Eidei Mechira is because the Eidei Gneva are only the beginning part of a process that must lead up to Misa, and that's called Chatzi Davar, because there's no Malchus for stealing a Nefesh. So Gemara says, in the name of Papa, that's impossible. Why? By Itmar, we have a base that we learned to the base measures that Eidei Gneva B'Nefesh Shehuzmu Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan Chad Omer Lokin, Chad Omer Lokin. I'm reading this time the Chizkiah the Omer Lokin. So we're going to prove that in the Machlok between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan, Chizkiah is the one who's going to say that when you steal a nefesh, and Edom testified to that effect that we saw the Gneva, if those Edom are subject to Hazama, the Edom will get Malchus. And how do we know that it's Chizkiah who says Lokin? Chizkiah said that Eidei Gneva B'Nefesh Shehuzmu Lokin. So that has to do with what's called a lav shenitan lazhars mises bezdin. I think, well, let's explain this after we see Rabbi Yochanan, and then we'll come back to Chizkiah. De'i Rabbi Yochanan, if you're going to tell me that this is the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, namely that there's no Malchus, is Kevan di Amar Nerogin, Havile Lav, Shenitan Lasaris Mises Bezdin. The Kol Lav, Shenitan Lasaris Mises Bezdin, ain't Lokin Olav. Right, Rabbi Yochanan was the one who said that in Eidei Gneva after Hazama, I guess the case where first the Eidei Mechira testified and then the Eidei Gneva testified, and at that point they are testifying that he's Chayiv Misa. And after Hazama, Nerogim, according to Rabbi Yochanan. How could that be? I'm sorry. So that would prove that Rabbi Yochanan could not possibly maintain the position that in Gneva you get Malchus, because that would be a lav hanitan lasaris mises bezdin. So therefore we prove that according to Chizkiah, there's no Malchus. No, fakir. I'm sorry. According to Rabbi Yochanan, there's no Malchus, and therefore Nerogim, because it's not a Lavanitan. But according to Chizkiah, the halacha is that Eidei Gneva Shehuzmu Loki. because he's the one who hold ein erogim, and therefore it's not a lavanita unless our mises based. So again, the bottom line is we've proven that according to Chizkiah, Eidei Gneva get Malchus, which means that Gonev Nefesh is Chayav Malchus. Iu lo lucky, inu hechi lucky. Now, if we're going to say that he doesn't get Malchus for stealing somebody, then the Edom don't get Malchus for testifying against him that he stole so much. And if there was Hazon. El Amar Rav Papa, the Ede Mechira, the Kuliyamalo Pligi, Dinerogim. If there was first Edus on the Gneva, and then afterwards there was Edus on the Mechira, and therefore there's a Gemara din that he is to be put to death for Gneva and Mechira, then there was Hazam against both of these sets of Edom, the Edom Gneva and the Edom Mechira. In that case, everybody agrees Nerogim. What does he mean, Nerogim? Just 1 second. Right, it means Edom Mechira Nerogim. Yeah, the Edom Gneva can't be killed because they only testified on Gneva. But here the Edom Mechira are testifying that he's Chayav Misa, and therefore Kasher Zoma, they are put to death. According to Chizkiah, since the Edei Gneva are Chayav Malchus, as we proved before in Chizkiah, therefore the Edei Mechira are a separate, independent unit of Edus, because as far as the first Edus on Gneva, that was a complete unit itself to generate Malchus. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he holds like the Rabbanon, back on Daf Pei Vav and Aleph, that even a Chatzi Davar is a valid Edus. So wherein lies the machlokus between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan? Ki pligi, be Edei Gneva, and Chizkiah Omar Ein Nerogim. Shegneva lechuda kaima, umachira lechuda kaima. So these two testimonies, these edios, are each an independent, separate entity. He's testifying on the Gneva, and he's testifying, and they're testifying on the Mechira. So as far as the Gneva is concerned, they're testifying on the Iser Gneva, and they get Malchus. And then there's a testimony on the Mechira, as a separate Edus, separate entity. Now here he adds something very interesting. He says, Haim potrim oso mea Malchus sheschai bahem begneva. Interesting. If there was only the Edus on Gneva, he'd be Chayv Malchus. But now that a second pair of Edom came in, paradoxically, he becomes on the Mechira. He paradoxically becomes Potter from Malchus because he's Chayv Misa. So the Chayv Misa obviously replaces or uproots the Chayv Malchus. So I guess what the Gemara is saying is, we saw this far in the past, that since the Eidei Gneva are generating a Chiyuv Malkus, they're not part of a process which will terminate with the Eidei Mechira of being Mechayev, of generating a Chiyuv Misa. So therefore they get Malkus in the case of Azom. Rabbi Yochanan, why does he disagree with Chizkiah? Omar, he's going to say that even the Eidei Gneva get Misa if there was Hazama, because they are integrated together into one whole package with the Eidei Mechira. And that's what's called in the language of the Gemara, Gneva Aschalta de Mechira. The Gneva is the beginning of Mechira. So it's like one Avera for which you have Misa that has two parts to it. So there's no Malkus for one of those two parts for Gneva. And that could also be because of the technicality of Lav Haba, of Lav Anita Lazar's Mises Besdin. So if the Eidei Gneva are not generating a Chiyuv Malkus because the Lav Anita and Lazar's Mises Besdin, then the point of their Eidus, the agenda of their Eidus is to put this guy to death. So again, even though each one of the two kitos of Eidim are a chatzi davar, one on the Gneva, the other on Mechira, the Sacha Kol, the total is going to lead to a Chiyuv Misa. And he's only Chayav Misa for both Gneva and Mechira, but nevertheless, we're going according to Rabbi Yochanan, who goes according to the Rabbanan, that there's no such psul as Chatzi Dover. And then Rav Papa adds, Umoder Rabbi Yochanan be Edom Arishonim, shall ben Soru Mora shahuzmu she'ein erog mitoch sheyichol lomar lal koso bonu. But in Ben Soru Mora, where the two rounds of Gneva, the first pair of Edim are a separate entity with its own purpose, its own agenda, namely to Mechayiv and Malkus, and therefore there's no Chiyuv Misa for the first pair of Edim, and we don't integrate them with the second pair of Edim. Okay. So this leads us to Omar Abaye, which I think we'll pick up tomorrow, B'li Neder. Okay then. So let me wish you a Chodesh Tov, even though it's not yet Tammuz officially, but it will be Tammuz very short. All right then? Okay, Kol Tov. Thank you so much.